So if we could all stand for the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Ehad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto, Leolam Vayed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be his glorious name, whose kingdom is forever and ever. Amen. And then the blessing before reading the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bechar banu mikol hamin, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who chose us from all the people and gave to us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah. Amen. And the reading this morning will be from Bereshit, or Genesis, chapter 23, and I'll do verses 1 through 20. Now Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died in Kirah Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Then Abraham rose from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner among you. Give me a burial site among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my lord, you are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our graves. None of us will refuse you his grave for burying your dead. So Abraham rose and vowed to the people of the land, the sons of Heth. And he spoke with them, saying, If it is your wish for me to bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and approach Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns, which is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence for a burial site. Now Ephron was sitting among the sons of Heth, and Ephraim, the son of the Hittite, answered Abraham in the hearing of the sons of Heth, even of all who went in at the gate of the city, saying, No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the presence of the sons of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead. And Abraham bowed before the people of the land. He spoke to Ephraim in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If you will only please listen to me, I will give you the price of the field. Accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. Then Ephraim answered Abraham, saying to him, My lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between me and you? So bury your dead. Abraham listened to Ephraim, and Abraham weighed out for Ephraim the silver which he had named in the standard. So Ephraim's field, which is in Machpelah, which faced Mamre, the field and cave which is in it, and all the trees which were in the field that were within all the confines of its border, were deeded over to Abraham for a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth, before all who went in in the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah and his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave that is in it were deeded over to Abraham for a burial site by the sons of Heth. And the prayer after, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'hayei olam, nata botekenu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah. Amen. Okay, so as we all know, this portion is called Chayei. And what does that mean? And this is your first fill-in. The life of Sarah. Very strange. But let's first look at what we're doing here. How many of you understand that Hashem's word is for us today, and it's written as an example and a lesson for us to learn from? Most people think of them as just a story or a history lesson. But let's see how this applies to this parasha. And I think a lot of you will be surprised how much it does apply today. So this parasha teaches that a person's true life is measured by their deeds and influence. And that's your next fill-ins. Person's life is measured by their deeds and influence, not just their years. How many of you have thought about that for your life? What are your deeds? What's your influence on the people around you? Are you showing them the good like Sarah did? Are you reaching out to other people like Sarah did? It's very important that we see what's going on here. Why were people so anxious to give him the land? Because of their faithfulness, because of who they are, because of what they were doing with them. And we need to take that into our lives. What are we doing with the people around us? And how are we serving them? You know, Sarah's life is celebrated through the values she embodied and passed on. And that's your next fill-in. Through the values. You know, there was so much value in her life because of who she was and what she did. How many of you, if a stranger comes to your door, would go in and knead bread? Not just bake it or not just prepare it, but knead it. So you've been making it from scratch, just to serve people who are strangers. You know, there's so much there that we need to see how important it is for us to reach out to other people, how important it is for us to honor the people around us. It's not just us. Yes, Pastor Vince.
I just wanted to share because I know growing up, when you grow up poor, like in projects like I did, one thing that the community did do, you always had the neighbors. They would come over and they would say, "Do you have a cup of sugar? Do you have a cup of milk?" or something like that. But it was commonplace. What I'm getting at is it was commonplace. It wasn't, they would, and in the little area that we lived, maybe about, they're like bungalows, but they're cut off and made homes out of. And there had to be about at least 20 families there. And this was a common occurrence where nobody
To be.
nobody got upset, like, I'm getting rid of my stuff or whatever. It was just something that we did there. So I understand like what you're saying, being hospitable and everything. Uh, you know, share. There's so much about Sarah's life that the word just doesn't, we have to use resources to find all this out. But when it's, uh, in all of the people.
Exactly. Go ahead, Carol.
I think there's subcultures, and Dr. Vince, I think that you came from a subculture. I know military subcultures. As soon as you see, you know that there's housing open next to you, and you see, people starting to look. Kids, as soon as that family pulls up, the kids from one house or 3 or 4 houses goes over and it gets the kids from the house, and usually, somebody takes a coffee pot over and then someone says, hey, well, we'll bring you dinner over. So, I mean, it's that culture that says, and the way I want to put it is because of class, I think, you're an alien, although you're still family. So we're going to minister to you, we're going to give to you because you expect to be reciprocated. So when you move to the next base, someone's going to do the same thing for you. And we've lost that drastically
Very much.
in our society today. Everybody's, well, I don't, they can keep to themselves because I'm not going to make that effort.
I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but in this culture, I mean, we all know each other and they can come over. I can borrow some, they can borrow from me and all of that. But in our culture right now, it's you must have discernment if someone comes up to your door, someone comes up to your gate, you really need discernment because we're living in a different era, and I agree with Pastor Vince. When I was young, I mean, everybody came to our house.
Right.
Everybody came to our house. My mother was a very giving woman. But in this culture, you have to really have discernment. And I normally meet everyone out at the gate and I don't invite them in unless I have discernment. I hate to mention this, but it's like Jehovah's Witnesses. I won't have them come in. I'll minister to them out at the gate. And now they don't even come around anymore. So it's, and I don't mean to be the Debbie Downer, but you have to have discernment.
That's true.
Wisdom. There you go. Wisdom.
Absolutely. On the other hand, Carol and I just ran into an example of just treating people nice and fairly. We were at the dental office the other day and just a normal visit, and we always talk with the receptionist and have a fairly good relationship with her. But it was when we started to leave, the receptionist says, could you wait a minute? And she got up and came around and said, I need a hug from each of you.
Yeah. 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 Well, when you're out and about, of course, when you're out and about and Holy Spirit leads you to speak with someone, of course, you're going to,
Absolutely.
you're going to gab,
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what it is. You just got to follow the Spirit. And it's so important to examine our hearts in every situation. And here we can see that we need to trust Hashem's guidance, especially during life's transitions. If we don't trust what he's telling us to do, and that's exactly what you just said. If we don't trust what he's telling us to do, we're in the wrong trap. One of the points, I'm going to skip ahead on the point a little bit, but one of the things here is you look at Abraham's life. He started, yes, he trusted God, to move out of his homeland. And then what? Then he said, well, this is not my wife. And again, later on, he said, well, and this is not my wife. And there was other things that he did in his life. What does this show us? What is this telling us? It's telling us that faith has to grow. As much as you have to begin with, the more you go through life and start walking it out, that's when you learn. That's what this whole parasha is about. Are we learning to trust him? You know, it was really true trust from Abraham after what, 100 and some years of living? Well, I hope it doesn't take me that long, but it's a growing situation. It's something that we all need to learn. And that's one of the things that his word is teaching us. Don't sell yourself short because of the mistakes you make, but realize it's a growing situation. Every step you take is a step closer. And we should rejoice in that. You don't go back and beat yourself up for the mistakes you made. He doesn't. Anyway. Then, just as Abraham did, we need to reflect on the way God's providence is subtly woven through life's events. And that's exactly what we're saying here. What is he taking you through? You know, what is he teaching you along the way? Are you ready for the next step? It takes some effort. It takes some faith. Why did he let you go through those hardships? Well, in many cases, I can see where some of the hardships I went through was so I could help other people in those areas. I've had a few examples that when I lost my daughter, I was able to help other people who have gone through the same situation. Little things like that. Yes, it's hard at the time. And yes, it's not pleasant. But you grow through it. And you're able to reach out afterwards and touch other people's lives. You know, God knows the beginning or for the end from the beginning. So are we ready to follow him? Yes, Pastor Vince.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I've found, unfortunately, I've always been a result-oriented person. And when I feel I have a job to do, I go do it. You know, that's what's important.
Right.
It's only now, I'm in my 70s, that I'm realizing that, and oftentimes I would brush people off because I felt I had a time constraint, you know, to accomplish either what someone else wanted me to do or what I decided I wanted to do. And I would kind of just brush them off. But it's only now that I'm realizing I need to stop and just go with what's happening in the moment.
Correct.
And, you know, it doesn't matter if something doesn't get done today that I thought I needed to do. That does, you know, and that's kind of been a revelation in my 70s. You know, how strange is that? But and I think faith and wisdom come with age, of course. And I know that some people have very strong faith, but I've almost thought that, gosh, I wish I had this understanding when I was young. You know, raising my family or
Yeah, don't we all?
yeah. I almost think, Lord, you know, how come it takes so long? to impart your wisdom to us.
Yeah,
Thick-
absolutely.
thick-headed.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my little 2 cents.
Okay.
One of my favorite sayings is, I'm not waiting for the storm to pass. I'm going to learn to dance in the rain.
There you go. That takes a lot of learning, though. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of dancing, you're right. So, oh, go ahead, Gary.
One of my favorite sayings is the life so short, the craft so long to learn. Like
Yeah.
what Sharon was saying. Wishing we had learned these things in the past. It's a nice idea. But we learn these things through the years at God's time for such a time as this. At almost 70, I am just beginning to get it. God's taken me in a whole different depth, and it's all of the victories, the failures, the mistakes, the lessons, all of that is a seasoning.
Yes, it is.
And you have to go through that to reach the place that you are. And
That's a good point.
not another quote my doctor told me when I was sniveling about aches and pains. He said, growing old is a privilege denied many, which shut me up. And you think, how many people haven't made it to this age?
That's true.
But those that do, it's for a reason and for a purpose.
Yeah.
And it's not like we're at an age where it's time to shut down or go to the retirement home or take it easy.
I feel like it sometimes.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you have acquired something. In this culture, we do not honor and respect the elders as other cultures do, which I think is tragic. But this, if you make it to those ages, it talks about running the race. And, for some people, they run a sprint. For some people, it's the marathon. But oftentimes, the greatest part of the race is the one at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Carol.
That's one of the reasons why there's so much written about the wisdom of those that have aged and the skills, the history, the things that they've learned to be mentoring those that are younger. It's not fair to put someone who has not been mentored, who's not been brought along, who's not been invested in, let's put that word, out. It's not fair to them. If we don't choose to mentor
Correct.
our young with the knowledge, the experience, and the history of the aged, we've lost the whole generation.
Lucy and I were talking about that. I came up with a quote. You don't send a baby against a prize fighter.
That's true.
I was just reminded of the scripture, Mark 9:49. It says, everyone will be salted with fire. And every sacrifice had to be brought with salt. And we're a living sacrifice. So therefore, we will be salted with fire, testing and refining,
Yep,
right?
absolutely. Go ahead.
I know I still have a lot of learning to do, but one
we
of
all?
the greatest things that I have been taught is that failure is only failure if it stops you from moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a walk, because Sometimes you have to pick yourself up and brush yourself off and learn your lessons and use those lessons to help you be a better person.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Gary.
Many years ago, when I reached the degree of second degree black belt, I was pretty cocky. I mean, I was good, I was cocky, and I was ready to open a studio. And when I told my master that, he said, "You're not ready." Kind of made me angry.
Uh-huh.
Like, what do you mean I'm not ready? Many years later, when I was sixth, seventh degree, I was working under the tutelage of another master. And it wasn't until I actually crossed the threshold of becoming a master that I realized I was finally ready to teach. And what that impressed me was you have to have gone there, done that, been that, gone, for the season, for the credibility, because you can't teach what you haven't been through.
That's true.
I mean, I can look at books, I can look at stuff, and I can regurgitate something, but
Until you experience it.
yeah, and anyways.
Yep, that's what we all need to do. You know, it's amazing how much even now I'm learning. Even after I turned 80, I'm still finding out there's a lot more. There's a lot more to life. And if you quit, if you stop looking at it, you stop growing. You know, how much can you give to other people? It's out of your heart. It's out of who God has taught you to be. We need to understand that. And that's the whole lesson here. Go ahead, Gary.
You know that thing at Disneyland? I think it's in the haunted house. That hallway where as soon as you take a step, the door just gets farther and farther and farther and farther away. It's the same kind of thing that the closer you get to God, the further and further you realize how much more you have to go.
Yeah.
Or it's like in football, if I advance 10 yards, the goalpost has been moved 20. I take another 10, now it's been moved 40. It's like the more you learn and know, the more you realize how much there is to know,
Absolutely.
which creates a hunger and a craving that you have for God and a deeper spiritual walk with Him. And it's almost an insatiable hunger for it. And then everything else around you just goes dim.
Yep. That's very true. Okay. So, as we go through this, we should be looking at how do we ensure our values endure beyond our lifetime? Are we making choices that reflect integrity and faith? You know, people watch us. It's not just what we say, but it's what we do. And it's how we treat other people. Do we recognize the power of kindness to shape not only our destiny, but other people's? This whole story about Abraham and Sarah is about their kindness to other people and how God is blessing them because of that. So we need to understand their example. And yes, like Tila says, we need to be careful who we invite in anymore. But we also need to be discerning. And that's what we need to learn. Now, Sarah's life teaches us that our legacy is not on what we own, but the values we live and transmit. That's what Sarah taught us. Abraham's actions remind us that faith is active. It requires courage and commitment. He never quit. He was 100 years old when he had the first child from Sarah. That's not quitting. But it's an example. Go ahead, Gary.
One of the things that I recently realized about this is that Abraham was still a sojourner in the land,
Yes, he was.
but yet God had promised him that land.
And I'll be getting to that. Just,
Do you want me to stop now so you can, I don't want to steal your thunder.
yeah. Yeah, hold on. Thunder away, God. Okay, so ask yourself, what values do I want to pass on? It's not about wealth or status or about kindness, integrity, but it is about kindness, integrity, and faith. Do we have the faith to take the next step, to show others that this is not the time to quit? It's a time to move on. It's a time to lift up other people. Say, I've been there, I've done that, and God has taken me through it. Each one of us has a different lesson, a different purpose. We need to step out. That's just because you're looking at it, Pastor Bruce. Yes, it is. Okay. Now, in verses 1 and 2, we see the closure in the life of the very first Hebrew matriarch, Sarah. And that's your next fill-ins. We see the closure of the life of the very first Hebrew matriarch. Now, a lot of people don't even realize that, but this was the beginning of God's chosen people. The people that he chose to what? To be a witness to the world. They were set apart as a special people to be a witness to the world, just like we are set apart to be a witness to the people around us. Sarah's death is important because it provides details of the very first death and burial of a Hebrew, the beginning of the Hebrew nation. Abraham and Sarah were living in Hebron when she expired, so it is natural that Abraham would want to entomb her there. Abraham purchased the cave of Machpelah to provide a proper burial for his wife, demonstrating respect for tradition and foresight in securing a permanent resting place. Abraham knew the importance of honoring the dead, of honoring his wife, and of setting it apart. He was honoring the dead with dignity and establishing roots in the land, which demonstrates faith and responsibility. Go ahead, Maria.
That's very nice that Abraham did that, honoring her at her death. Where was he when she died?
They were not living together.
No. And where was Isaac when she died?
Yeah, that it doesn't say, but I know they were not together.
No,
No,
they were not together,
they were
and
not
they
together.
stayed away. Isaac stayed away for 3 years. He never went back. Who took care of the farm?
That's a good point.
That's what I thought, only Eliezer. But Abraham went one way, Isaac went another way. Sarah was left alone and she died alone. And then when she died, that's when he came back,
Yeah,
with or without his other wife. Tell me, yeah.
yeah. We'll get to that
Let's
in a little
talk
bit
about
too.
that.
I'll get to that in a little bit. So it's key to remember that as of this point in time, God's promise of a land set aside for Abraham had not come to fruition. It would be another 5 or 6 centuries before that promised land. What's his promise to you? And is it for you in your lifetime? Or are you setting an example for your progeny on those around you? You know, Abraham used the land of others. He lived in the land governed by others and didn't possess any territory of his own. You know, that's hard to believe, but he was an alien. He was a stranger in the land. Yes, he was respected, but that was not his land. He lived in a land governed by others and didn't possess any territory of his own. It is ironic that the only piece of real estate that Abraham would ever be able to call his own was a cave used as a tomb for his wife. And that's your fill-ins. The only piece of real estate Abraham would ever be able to call his own was a cave used as a tomb for his wife. Go ahead, Gary.
One other thing is that Abraham was a sojourner there,
Yes, he was.
but by buying that cave and burying his dead, he was forever saying goodbye to Badam, or Badan, Aram. In other words, he was saying goodbye to hometown. He
Correct.
wasn't going,
Yes.
I mean, that in and of itself is, what's the old, before you can taste my tea, you must first empty your cup. God can't bless us with an indwelling until we give up ourselves.
That's true.
And what I think Abraham was doing also is making the faithful commitment of abandoning where he was from, abandoning his past, abandoning everything for a future he knew would occur, but would never see.
Correct.
Because we still have to go through from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to Joseph to Egypt to slavery to Moses, delivered, Torah, 40 years, wilderness, Joshua,
Oh, yeah. There's a lot.
before the family moved in, shall we say?
Yeah. That's why I said it was 4 or 5 centuries after he did this before they would get the land. You know. So the 3 great patriarchs of the Bible are all buried in Hebron, now a territory given over to Israel's enemy, the Palestinians. This may be why David's choice of Hebron was his first capital city when he becomes king of Judah. Go ahead, Maria.
I believe it was the 6-day war
Yeah.
that Israel was embarked in, that they won that burial place. And that general, that Moshe Dayan, the one that has the patch,
Right.
he was in that burial house. And they found a small hole in the wall, too small for a man, but for a small child. And he got a little boy from the village close by and lowered him down into the cave. And the little boy said it was too dark to see what was there. It wasn't like he discovered King Tut's tomb, you know, all the gold and the thing. He said there was nothing there, but there was chambers. And in some of the chambers there were bones. And they gave it back. I mean, what's wrong with these people? I mean, thousands of men died to get that land, and as soon as they get it, they give it back.
Yeah.
But they were there. He saw the grave. He saw the tombs.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we see that throughout history. And even now, today, how much of the land have they given up? Yeah. Pastor Vince?
No, I was just going to share, it's amazing, like you said, they negotiate land for peace, which is ridiculous because they're never going to get peace with
Correct.
with the people there. But that you're exactly right. I mean, why, when the thing to leave and cross the Jordan and go back to Transjordan, and it was after this war that they said, leave, stay here, we could live in peace. Wow.
Right.
Yeah, we know the result of that decision.
Exactly. And they say it'll never be peaceful. So the bargaining session between Abraham and the sons of Heth may seem a little bit strange. If somebody offers you a parcel of land for free, wouldn't you move in and take it? But he didn't do that. Why? Because there's nothing free. There's nothing free. Heth was the son of Canaan, who himself was the son of Ham, one of Noah's 3 sons. The descendants of Heth became known as the Hittites, one of the Canaanite tribes inhabiting the land before Israel's conquest. And then we read in Bereshit 23, 7-9, Abraham got up, bowed before the people of the land, the sons of Heth, and spoke with them. If it is your desire to help me bury my dead, then listen to me. Ask Ephraim, the son of Zochar, to give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns, the one at the end of his field. He should sell it to me in your presence at its full value. Then I will have a burial site of my own. Abraham understands that spiritual promise, and that's your next fill in. He understands that spiritual promise requires tangible commitments. Have you ever thought about that? When God promises you something, are you willing to step out for it? Or do you think he's just going to give it to you? What's he going to require? Some of the things I've had to go through in my life just so I can be able to help other people. It was not pleasant at the time, and if I could take it back, I would. But then I can see how it can help other people. I can see how I can step out and make a difference in somebody's life. And through that, I can honor God. That's Gary.
These are a couple of better ones, wheeling and dealing.
Correct.
And in that sense, part of that culture, I mean, buyer beware, and
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. And if they can lie, cheat, this, that, or whatever, they will. In Abraham's wisdom, It was a legally binding covenant. An exchange of fair value, market price, documented, crossing the T's, dotting the I's,
Yep.
and witnesses, yada, yada, yada. So it could never be contested. And God has a tendency to honor those contracts even through and down multiple generations.
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
and he has a really big problem to break those covenants. Saul and the Gibeonites.
Yep.
The contract, the covenant that Saul broke. Then King David comes to the throne, 3 years of drought. David goes to God, what's up? And he says, well, Saul violated the covenant with the Gibeonites. Saul's dead and buried. And then to make it right, David had to hand over, 12 descendants of Saul's to the Gibeonites to be slaughtered to resolve the issue.
Yeah.
And that was a covenant Saul made. He's dead and buried. His violation of it long ago, but God's, even though Saul's dead and gone, because Saul was king, those consequences reverberated well past his death
Oh, sure.
to his descendants.
Well, that's the same with us. The consequences of our action, what? They go down generations.
I'm inclined to believe here also that Abraham chose to purchase this land because he wanted it to be abundantly clear that all of his blessings come from the Lord and not from man.
That's a good point. Absolutely. And there's even more to that. Now, we've got to remember, Ephraim was a leader among the Hittites, and the people, or who were the people who ruled over this area. Ancient records reveal good legal reasons for why Abraham's negotiations for the land or for the cave as a tomb for he and his wife took the course they did. Abraham and his clan were resident aliens. They were not part of the citizens there. In that day, foreigners typically could not purchase land. Land was everything. For a family to lose its land was a catastrophe. For a family to sell its land to a foreigner was an abomination. Yet it did occur, and it was legal. However, the way in which the land was acquired was very important. If Abraham had accepted it as a gift, not only would that have been insulting to the Hittites, but it likely would have been challenged in the years to come if someone were to claim that it was wrong to give land to resident aliens in the first place. Go ahead, Maria.
I think it's in the book of, I'm not sure, Jubilee or Jasper, that Jasher, okay?
Okay.
I could hear Tila say, that's wrong, Maria, saying it wrong, that this cave where Adam and Eve later went to when they were out of the Garden of Eden, that this is where they were buried, that God put something over that particular cave and that land that kept other people out. So it wasn't a desirable place that people wanted to go to or to have a family picnic in, let's go and explore this. They stayed out. And Abraham knew this, and he knew that if he got it for free, it wouldn't be his.
Correct.
And he paid a high price.
Yes, he did.
because he wanted the people to know that this is his land.
Exactly.
And he wasn't going to get it. Pastor Bruce said that, I'm waiting for the lightning to hit me, that he wasn't going to get it for free. That was just show and tell, so that the people would see, oh, look at how great this guy is.
Yeah.
He was not going to give it to Abraham. And he put a high price on it because he
Correct.
figured Abraham said, oh, no, I'm not going to pay that. But I bet you he was surprised when he said, okay, buddy, I'll pay you a price.
Yeah.
But he didn't want that land because God protected that cave in that particular area. And he kept people out. So people weren't going to go there.
Well, one thing I would disagree with is we've never discussed this in this parashah, but remember, Abraham land was promised to him, and
Yes, it was.
everywhere that he went, he saw good land, he saw bad land, he saw great real estate, you know. So I would, so he could have,
could've.
it's something like that. But this place, there was a reason why this was the choicest place to be. And the price that he paid was at that time exorbitant.
Right.
So he paid a very good price for it. My thing was when I read this, I'm thinking, why did he pick this with everywhere else in this country that he could have put her, especially places that are fertile and no, he wanted this cave. Yeah. Like it's tradition. And and can the Lord lift up the bones of Adam and Eve and place them there? Well, absolutely. Maybe somewhere in the writings somebody got insight of that, and that's why we're told that to this day.
Correct.
But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And okay, and that's what I wanted to say, but I know Sharon wanted to jump in. Go ahead, Sharon.
Good morning again. This whole subject is very interesting, and what Maria said really caught my eye, that there's something that keeps people out. And if you go back to the garden, the Zohar is not canon. It's just interesting reading. But within those books, it says that the cave of Machpelah is actually the entrance to the Garden of Eden.
I've heard that too.
And that if a person were to go in, it does not smell like death. It smells like
Yeah.
fragrant flowers and trees, and it just has a beautiful natural smell. And the fact that Maria said that there's something keeping it out, and you go back to Adam and Eve where they posted the two angels with flaming swords that do not allow anybody to pass through. So it's not canon, it's not biblical, but I think it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, that's true. So, back to where we were, Abraham could not accept Ephraim's offer of the cave as a gift. Oh, Pastor Bruce,
I'm sorry, just to
that's all right.
Hebron, the ancient name of Hebron is Kiryat Arba,
Right.
which means the city of four. And it's the four couples that are buried there.
Ah, yeah. Yeah. So Abraham also had to be very careful in his bargaining, because if he bought it at a price that did not seem fair, to the later generations, that was reason enough to take the land back. Therefore, Abraham differed so that Ephraim set a price before Abraham, that he was forced to make an offer. He was setting a price, as we have already mentioned, way higher than what it should have been. But the price of 400 shekels of silver was high, but by Abraham graciously insisting that he was happy to pay the full price, he took away most legal challenges that would have led to having that land taken away. He was wise in his bargaining there.
Reminds me of a quote from the movie Godfather. He made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Yep. Okay, go ahead, Maria.
Jeremiah, when he wanted to claim back his ancestral home, his land, they asked him for the price of 17 shekels. That's just to get a piece of land, 17. Abraham was, for the same amount of land, 400 shekels.
Correct.
So you can imagine the difference. 17 to him was 400.
Yeah. Yes, they are. Yep. Okay. Okay. But burial spots were terribly important to the ancients, and still today. That's why this process took place before many of the town's citizens, the Hittite citizens. It was so they would be witnesses to the transfer of ownership from Ephraim to Abraham. So not only did he pay a high price, he did it in front of many witnesses. So who was to stand up for him? The Hittites. This also shows us that in business, our relationships or our community work, choose honesty, choose fairness. You know, look at what we're doing. Are we worried that, oh, we're going to be overcharged for whatever, or we have to work too hard for whatever we get? Remember, we're working for God. And when you work for God, He honors you. He is our provider. It's through Him that we get, but we've got to trust in Him. We've got to take that step. And that's going back to what I said in the beginning. That's what this is all about. We need to learn from the stories that Hashem is giving us, how we need to run our lives today. It's important that we make an example. Now, moving on, Abraham needed children for the covenant of promise to be carried on, and so did Yitzhak. Of course, the first step toward that end was finding a suitable wife. Abraham knew that the choice of a wife for Yitzhak was all important. He used his highest, best, and most trustworthy servant to go and find Yitzhak a wife, but in a manner carefully prescribed by Abraham. It wasn't just a random thing. He knew what the limitations had to be. The first matter was the choice must not be a Canaanite woman. After all, if Abraham and his descendants were to possess the land, it would not be well for Yitzhak to enter into alliance via marriage with one whose family might soon be dispossessed. Something that a lot of people don't think about. Who are you joining with? Not just for marriage, but for life relationships, for business relationships. And what can be the results of that? Is God putting in your heart, first of all, what to look for? Is He telling you, be careful of this, watch out for that, but you need to make these choices. You need to choose these people to work with. You need to choose this person to marry. You need to choose under these guidelines. Yes, Pastor Bruce.
What's interesting too is he sends Eleazar to Laban,
Right,
who is a pagan,
correct.
and therefore his daughters are at least saturated in paganism. And that's interesting because we read earlier he left Hebron with all the souls that he had made. Remember, we talked about the whole idea was they were born again. They were believers in the God of Abraham. So here, Abraham doesn't choose a believer. He chooses a bloodline.
Yep,
And it's very important to understand that because there's still the battle of the bloodline going on here. And that battle is going on even to this day. It's
absolutely.
It's not the confession of faith, it's the bloodline. And so it's just and I'm not insinuating you should, marry a pagan, obviously, but it's a very interesting point. He
Yeah.
had an option and he chose the bloodline because that's what God was doing in his generation.
Correct. And we need to remember too that when Abraham was called out, what was he doing? He was an idol maker with his father. So it was a change for him. So Abraham did not want a woman raised in the Canaanite religions to raise his children, or not to raise the children of promise. It's important that his children be, like Pastor Bruce says, from the right bloodline. Second, it's unlikely, in the unlikely event that even the servant was unsuccessful in persuading the chosen wife to come down to Canaan, the servant was not to take Yitzhak to Mesopotamia for the marriage. It was very strict rules that he laid down. We need to apply that to our life. Then we go on to Bereshit 24, and I'll read 1 through 10. Now Abraham was old, advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, please place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live. But you will go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Yitzhak. The servant said to him, suppose the woman is not willing to follow me to this land. Should I take your son back to the land from where you came? Then Abraham said to him, beware that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who speaks to me and who swore to me, saying, to your descendants, I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this my oath. Only do not take my son back there. So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. Then the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master and set out with a variety of good things of his master in hand. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. You know, the words of instruction Abraham gave to his servant are really his last recorded words. Here his faith was firm. There was no worry because it was all in God's hand. How long did it take for Abraham to finally come to the point where there was no worry? Again, as I said in the beginning, this is showing us that it's a growth process. Go ahead, Tila.
Well, in it, it says his oldest servant, and so we think it's Eleazar, and
Correct.
Eleazar does mean God is my help.
Correct.
And so everything that rolls together as things that we choose, and we learn this in our older age, is that God is our help, no matter what the
Correct.
circumstances, and we need to make that choice.
Absolutely.
We need to hear what the Holy Spirit has to say to follow the direction of where he's leading, guiding us.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, sometimes we have to sit still. Lessons well learned. Sometimes you have to, you're put down to sit down to listen instead of,
Absolutely.
and anyway, that's all I want to say.
But he does. He puts you through all these different situations for a purpose.
I have a question on 24:1.
Okay?
I mean 24, not 2B. Please place your hand under my thigh.
Yes.
Take an oath. I don't understand that. I don't. Yeah.
And
What's that about?
well, I wasn't going to go into that, but I'll take it very brief. Remember that Abraham received the sign of the covenant. And what was that? That was circumcision. So placing your hand under the thigh entered you into the covenant because of the circumcision. That is one. Go ahead, Carol.
It's also because of the promise of the progeny.
Correct. And also because of the promise of the progeny. Absolutely. So, so earlier, Abraham asked, how will I know that I will possess the land? He had lied about Sarah being his wife. He wanted to know how he would have descendants if Sarah was barren, and so on. However, years and years of walking with God brought maturity and faith. It does not happen fast. This trusted servant, and I say probably Eleazar, but it doesn't say for sure, who was spoken of earlier in the chapters, had been much affected by Abraham. He journeyed back to Mesopotamia, Abraham's birthplace, and as he arrived in the city of Nahor, he prayed that God would be, or God's will be done. And that's your next fill in. He prayed. Why is this important? Because he was not of the family of Abraham, except through adoption, through entering in as his servant. And yet, Abraham was enough influence to him that he would pray to God in trying situations so that he knew that God would help him. He had faith, but his faith was in God. That's what we need to learn from this. If he had faith in God, do we? What's it going to take to us? And this I found interesting too, although some Bible versions, sorry, go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Just an interesting sideline. He says to the servant, "Don't take Itzhak to my brother's house, brother's land."
Correct.
It's interesting because we have this argument going on today about what is Israel, who are the Israelites. It's becoming a very big issue.
Yeah.
In fact, it's kind of splitting the right, the political right. And what's interesting here is Itzhak is the only patriarch that never left the land of Israel. He didn't operate in the promise of the land because the promise goes all the way to Haran.
Correct.
He operated in what was currently the land that God had given them, not the promise. So it's very important to understand that what we know as Israel today is the core
That's about all.
of the land of Israel. And there's a lot more, but that's still in the promise. And he told Abraham said, "Don't take my son outside the core." So that's a very interesting thing. And we need to be really aware of that because of the arguments that are going on today, that the core of Israel is what we're dealing with. The promise will come later, whenever it comes.
Correct. And as I was getting to, one of the things that I found very interesting is this servant, again, we assume maybe it have been Eleazar, called upon the name of God. But most Bibles, in fact, say that he called upon the Lord. When you go back to the original Hebrew, it says he called on Yahweh. He knew the proper name of God, and he could call on it. And this was his servant. Yes, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, in verse 12 of chapter 24,
Uh-huh.
it's Eleazar that this is the first spoken prayer in the Bible.
Yes.
Abraham isn't recorded as praying. No one has been recorded as praying. This is the first time prayer is officially recognized as prayer. And he uses the same format that we use to this day, "O Lord our God, King of the universe," or
Absolutely.
he says Master of Abraham. So the format begins right here. And
Yep.
It's interesting that Eleazar is the one that prays for the first time.
Yeah, that was all right. So I can skip that. But one of the points here is we can't wait passively for something to happen. We need to know that we need to step out, trust in God. If he tells us to do something, follow his directions. And that doesn't mean just jump into it. It means listen to him, follow his directions, and then step out. Now I'm going to step aside a little bit because I found something interesting. It says in the word, Abraham's servant took 10 camels. Well, most archaeologists will say that that cannot be, because camels were unknown to the region at this time. And some fairly recently findings, though, shed light on this matter. Records found in southern Mesopotamia, which was from the old Babylonian kingdom era, mentioned drinking camel's milk. So possibly there was. Further, some Sumerian and Akkadian writings from that same era make mention of a creature used for transportation that was literally called a donkey of the sea land. Alongside these writings were pictographs of dromedaries, animals we sometimes erroneously call humped camels, called one-humped camels. In fact, a dromedary is not a camel. So it was just an interesting aside that it appears that these were dromedaries that he brought up. Now, is that completely true? I'm not sure, because that was strictly a commentary. But I thought it very interesting. So here we see something often in the Bible, a woman or women coming to the well to fetch water. This is not just a romantic notion or a device, but women from the Middle East, that was part of their job. This was a well-known thing to do. In that era, the women stayed separate from the men, at least for the most part. There were certain times of the day when it was understood that women would go to the water well, a spring or a river to draw water. But that's your fill-in. It was understood. In item 4. This was a standard task for women, and usually men were not around. It was an issue of traditional modesty, and that's your next fill-in. It was a traditional modesty that in particular applied to unmarried girls or young women. That is why when we read a narrative about the male Bible characters encountering a woman at a well or a spring, there is often a sense of surprise. The girl is startled at the sight or voice of a man. And actually, this tradition is still somewhat prevalent in many parts of the world today. The women do that, the men stay away. Go ahead, Carol.
When we were in Israel, I think a wonderful example of this is one time we stopped at a little roadside restaurant outside one of the IDF bases. And Roselia went around back to kind of see what was going on back there. And it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And there was an IDF soldier back there doing the Amida. And so they started talking. And she was exuberant. And she said, well, look at this. And he thought that she was going to touch him. And Roselia said, he almost fell backing up. And if you'll go to, we were in Yerushalayim at the hotel, when the couples would come in, they never came together. They would come in separately. They sat across from each other and they never touched. So I thought it was very interesting that there's still those boundaries, those guidelines going on in the Orthodox. But people got to know who that person was, but how they wanted to live their life, their dreams, their morality, the whole thing, before they even touched hands.
Absolutely.
I think that's missing today.
You know, look, it would be so nice if you really understood your partner that you're getting with. Yes, Pastor King.
Yeah, we saw several couples and we knew they were courting. Like you
Yeah.
said, they were sitting off him and her far away, but they were courting. It was very interesting. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, just talking. Oh,
Carol.
yeah.
Now you see them out on a date and I swear up and down that they're texting each other. Because nobody knows anything about anybody else of any kind of depth. What kind of moral character? What are your desires in life? What are your goals? What are your, what's your morality?
Yep.
And I think that's why one of the big reasons that we have marriages failing like mad is because they get married before they know each other.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that happens way too often. Go ahead, Taryn.
I follow this lady. She's an Orthodox Jew. I follow her on like social media, and she says like even like her as like, you know, she's married, she has 4 daughters with her husband. Even when they go out in public, they don't like, you know, do any PDA or, you know, they don't hardly touch each other. They don't touch each other because they don't want like the cleanliness law.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it's called, but they don't want to like broadcast like, oh, I'm not touching her because she's on her period or whatever. So they do that even, you know, as married couples, they keep their distance. And, you know, at home obviously is a different story, but out in public, they don't want to like broadcast, you know, whatever else.
Correct.
They also want to live an example for their children.
That's where.
We went to downtown, when we went to the Jewish district in LA, one of the times we walked into a bookstore,
Yeah.
which is my favorite place in the world to go. And there was a gentleman standing there, and there had been 2 young adults that were talking to him before. And when we got up there, he was just in a tizzy. I mean, a real tizzy. And he was going on and on and on. And so when he calmed down a little bit, he said, do you know what's wrong with today's world? And we looked at him and said, no. And he said, that young couple are out and about.
With no.
Their parents don't know where they're at, and they were probably in their mid-20s. And he said they're not maintaining a suitable distance. And if you go down to the district, you'll see husbands and wives separated, not because they don't love each other, but also they don't want their children knowing that that kind of contact in public is okay.
Good.
Going along what you're saying about marriages failing. You can use the term multi-generational curse. Owen calls it the multi-generational process, or just family baggage that couples bring to a marriage without being resolved prior to that. So you got the man brings his baggage, she brings her baggage. Now they got a lot of baggage. Then they pass it on to their kids, and now they got baggage, and it goes on and on. Titus talks about one of the roles of elders for both men and women, elders, to what you're mentioning earlier about mentoring. It's their responsibility to take these young couples under their wings and teach them
Correct.
the art of marriage, of how to act, how to perform, how to have a good, happy, healthy marriage. And that's significantly lacking.
One of the things that we found in First Kefa is that people have to know what righteousness is. They have to know what their behavior should be, what godly behavior is. And then it goes on to say, husbands, do this. We see that in Ephesians 2. Husbands, this is your role. Women, this is your role. And I'm not talking about, well, I've said I have to be subservient, but it's the fact that both have to live with righteousness themselves and in righteousness with their spouse. And we don't teach that either, which is very sad.
Yep. Okay. Okay. So, moving on here. Eleazar went to the well at the time of day he did, because he knew that was when he'd find eligible females, and that's your fill-in. He knew that's when he would find eligible females. You know, this was not a fortuitous coincidence. That's what you did in the Middle East when you wanted to find an eligible girl. He saw some girls coming and proceeded to set up a test for God so that he could be sure the woman he picked for Yitzhak was the woman God intended. Before he could even finish speaking to God, the answer to his prayers arrived in the form of Rivka, daughter of Butiel. When you're faithful to God, he's faithful to you. Are we really examining our hearts and being faithful to what God is telling us? No, he's not going to lead us astray. So now we see that before Eleazar could even finish speaking to God, the answer to his prayers arrived in the form of Rivka, the daughter of Butiel, who was Abraham's nephew. And as we said here, or said earlier, the bloodline. That's what we were looking at. This was the blessed bloodline. He was the son of Abraham's brother, Nahor. So Butiel, Rivka's father, would have been Yitzhak's first cousin. And Rivka, as a daughter of Yitzhak's first cousin, was basically a second cousin. You know, Yitzhak and Rebekah shared a blood relationship, but not a close one. And again, this is going back to what was said. It's the bloodline that Abraham was carrying forward. Nevertheless, Eleazar kept silent, for he wanted to see how this would all play out. He wanted to be sure. Guess what? Rivka kept drawing water until all 10 camels were fully satisfied. You know, this was probably pretty impressive to Eleazar, and I think it would be to anybody when you realize how heavy water is and how much it would take for 10 camels. That's a lot. Yep. I believe that, 50 trips. Yeah. Yeah, and he stood by watching. Of course, then they were kind of forbidden to step in, traditionally. I don't remember reading how old she was.
It never tells. The only female I notice that gives the age is Sarah.
Right.
They don't give the age to Rebecca, Rachel, Leah. Why?
That's true. That I
Not
have no
important, huh?
idea. Yeah, but you're right. I haven't read that anyplace.
Some rabbis say she was 3 years old.
No, that's
pretty good for a girl 3 years old to do that and go get married.
yeah, exactly. Well, I think it'd be very difficult for her to even carry the water to begin with. Yeah. So. So Eleazar gave Rivka gifts of significant value, and yes, including a nose ring. This was not at all an unusual piece of jewelry for that day. So Rivka raced home and told her mother and the other family clan members what had just happened. And when Rivka's brother, Laban, who will play an important role later, saw the expensive jewelry worn by his sister, he ran to meet the man who gave her these things. You can imagine what he was thinking. So while meeting a stranger, a guest, was always a big occasion back in that day, the fact that this was a wealthy stranger excited Laban. Yeah. So, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just curious. I'm reading about all these women that are so beautiful. Sarah was so beautiful. And then Rivka was so beautiful, and the men are rich. I mean, How does this relate to today? And they're young. No, I'm talking about the men are old and rich and the women are young and beautiful. Well, it's everywhere, believe me.
Yeah,
I'm just curious as to why it's mentioned. It's more than one place in the Bible. It's in many places. Is that important to God? I mean, I don't understand it sometimes.
yeah, in this case it is. If you read the whole story of Abraham, he was called out. He was asked by God to step out in faith, and he did. So he was obedient to God from the very beginning. And it was through his obedience and his growth that he prospered, and that he was given Sarah, who was very special, part of his clan. Go ahead.
Two things, whether that's true or not, but anyway, it's the spiritual beauty and the strength of the women seems
Correct.
to flow down, that they're, I mean, yeah, I'm sure she was very beautiful in the flesh, possibly, but again, there's such a spiritual beauty and the spiritual strength. I mean, can you imagine, him watching her do this 50 or 60 times, carrying this heavy, these women are strong.
Yeah,
And we have spiritual strength. And I believe that does come down, that we have spiritual strength today
absolutely.
when we're seeking the Father.
Absolutely.
We also read that the beauty of a woman isn't necessarily in her appearance.
Correct.
It's the way she carries herself, it's the way she speaks, it's her kindness, her grace, her ability to relate to other people. The Proverbs 31 woman, who's our example. If you read through that, it's about her characteristics and her compassion, her love, and her mercy, and her responsibility, her responsible nature. It's not necessarily about her looks.
Right. Not necessarily physical beauty.
Also, how she represents her.
No.
The one thing we need to take a look at is, although God's really not saying, go here, go there, do this, do that, he's the matchmaker behind this.
Absolutely.
Abraham gave the mission to Eliezer. Eliezer prayed for this sign. Rebecca goes to the well. She does what she's supposed to do.
Yep.
Then the proposal goes to Laban. Laban agrees. Rebecca agrees. We all go back. Isaac agrees. Matchmaker, make me a match. I mean, that's what this is. And what you're talking about, a woman's spirit. The first time I laid eyes on Lucy, it was a done deal. But I had no clue, but my spirit did.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I tried to ignore it. I tried to run from it. Hell, I went to Mount Whitney for a week trip to get away from it. But that lasted one day. The point is, there's a growing spirit inside Lucy that when I saw it, nobody else in the room existed. Anyway.
Still is, yeah. Good, Pastor Bruce.
The Spirit of God is often referred to as the Shadchan.
Mm-hmm.
Shadchan is the matchmaker. And the whole point, we can follow, I taught this when I was teaching on the Hebrew, the Jewish wedding and the bride and the bridegroom. From page 1 to the last page of the Bible, it's all about the father looking for a bride for his son.
Yep.
And I realize there's other topics in there, but that is an overarching theme throughout the word. So if indeed he's orchestrating everything, which we believe he is, then this is why we can say beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. He brings the most beautiful woman. And look, you're not attracted initially by spiritual qualities. Give it up. You're attracted by the physical. And God has designed it that way throughout all of nature. So when you see a woman that captures you or takes your breath away, the beauty, your wife should be the most beautiful woman in the world to you. Now, does that mean she is the most beautiful? No, she's the most beautiful to you. And God has set that up to draw you together initially. And then the ball's in your court to make sure that you court and do everything that needs to be done, and then decide to spend your lives together. And as you get older and that beauty fades physically, it doesn't fade in your eyes. It still remains. So that Shad Khan is working from day one to the end. It's SHADCHAN, Shad Khan. And that's the matchmaker.
That's the matchmaker.
We have affirmation that God is a matchmaker. Because if you look in verse 60, 59 and 60, thus they sent away their sister Rivkah and her nurse with Abraham's servant and his men. They blessed Rivkah, saying to her, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gate of those who hate them. And that's very similar to the same blessing that Abraham received. Count the stars, count the grains of sand. So they were meant to be.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So, go ahead, Maria.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
True.
Unfortunately, when they say Sarah was beautiful, she was beautiful physically, because not only did the Pharaoh think she was beautiful, but all the men that saw her said she was beautiful.
Yep.
So it was more physical. I know that when you see your husband for the first time, you'd say, oh, an Adonis, he's so beautiful, he's so handsome. And yet when somebody looks at him, he says, what does she see in him? It's what you see in that person. So probably not just her physical, but her inner beauty made her more beautiful. Like I read an article once, Hedy Lamarr, back in the 40s. They say that when she would enter a nightclub and go to be seated, that the people actually stopped talking.
Yeah.
She was so beautiful that they couldn't keep up the conversation. That happens to me all the time.
Maria.
But, I studied this little family reunion, and it's not what we read. Laban, if you notice, Laban and the father came out to talk to Eliezer.
Correct.
Then later you read it's Laban and the mother.
Correct.
What happened to the father? Well, according to Rashi, they connived and wanted to renege on the agreement, get the money, and they conspired to kill Eliezer. That's why you don't hear of him anymore, according to Rashi. That is why they were in such a hurry to get in and out, because they were trying to get out of that contract. And it says later on that when they left, you notice that they just gave the blessing, but none of the family members, as was the custom, came with her. They sent her off alone, just with the nurse. No family member accompanied her, which meant they were not very happy. And my question is, why did Jacob's mother said, "Go to my brother." I mean, it's like saying, the lion is hungry. Go over there to the lion's den. I guess that was the only safe place, but that was not a safe place. That's why Rebecca wanted to get out and to marry a man that was much, much, much older. He was already 40 years old, and she was a teenager. And yet she said, "I'm leaving right now. I'm not staying." And when they said, if you read in your Bible, it says, well, stay 10 days. In the actual Hebrew, it says stay 10 months or a year. It's a big difference. I don't know why they translated it into days,
Yeah.
but it's months. That's why Eliezer said, I'm out of here, because they were planning on killing him.
That's
The end.
that's a different midrash than what I've read, but what I read is that the father was very old and was not able. Well, I don't always go along with Rashi, but
Spanish. Are you prejudiced?
hey, Gary.
There's another half to your quote, Maria. There's another half to your quote that beauty is only skin deep, but ugly is all the way to the bone. This is just my experience. I first saw Lucy. It was a presence of purity and innocence that I saw. I got practically a photographic memory anyway. And she was wearing a white blouse, these tight corduroys, and the ugliest shoes I've ever seen. But that's not what I saw. You know, yeah, she was pretty, but the predominant thing I saw was a purity and innocence. And that was the attracting factor. Just a
Okay. Go back to where we were. Rivka's generosity, basically offering water to Eliezer's camels, shows that these are your fill-ins. Kindness is a key trait for joining Abraham's covenantal family. So kindness and family are your fill-ins there. And here we see that true greatness, and that's your next fill-in, is revealed through acts of kindness and hospitality. So kindness and hospitality are the last ones. And I'm sorry, greatness is revealed. The fill in for 5. That was kindness is a key for joining his family. So we can see that our kindness can can dictate our future. How are we kind to one another? And it makes a difference where we go. That's one of the things that brought us here to this church is when we first, in fact, the first time we came to the church, our granddaughter had just had a major accident. She got kicked in the head playing soccer and had a very bad concussion. Well, the first person that we encountered coming in here, again, it was our first time, was Pastor Vince. And he asked what was going on, and we told him. Well, halfway during the service, Pastor Bruce stopped the service and said, "We need to pray for him." Things like that make a tremendous difference. Go ahead, Tila.
Just an example, being in the hospital, if you go in the hospital and you really don't want to be there, you could really make your stay miserable. But
Oh,
the
yeah.
thing of it is when you go in with the love of God in you and with all that he is, all of a sudden you're being treated like a queen. I mean, people will do things for you. And so it's that spirit, it's that spirit of God's love through you, the light through you that ministers to even, I mean, I had some really strange nurses, okay?
Yeah.
But praise God, I mean, it would just, I've never been treated so great, but I know it wasn't me, but I know it was the Father that spoke into the different people, and you got tremendous treatment. Now I have a sister that hates to be in the hospital, and they know it the minute she walks through the door. She's online today too. And she walks in and they really don't want her, and she don't want to be there, and so she doesn't get to stay.
Yeah.
No, Tanya. It's Tanya. And I know she's online.
No, when I was in there, I wasn't treated like a queen, but but along with what you said, we got to know the nurses, got to be with them. And when I got out of there, I actually got cards from them. It makes a difference how you act. But that surprised me. Anyway, here we see that Rivka's kindness made a big difference. Tanya says, thanks, sis. Yeah, Eleazar was invited to stay with the family, but to first have a meal. First things first. Eleazar was a loyal servant, and he was on a mission. So he wanted to know if he was just wasting his time. He stated straight away for the record who his master was and what his goal was. He came out and told the family, my master's looking for a wife for his son. Then, so everyone could be certain that the girl's modesty was not violated and that she had committed nothing untoward in speaking with a male, and that all intentions were honorable, he restated that all that was told to him by Abraham. That's customary Eastern hospitality. Rivka's father and brother said that it was far from them to go against God's will for their daughter. And we can be sure that they were not so much anxious to get rid of Rivka as they were to receive the customary gifts in return. Remember, Abraham was rich and he was he was giving a lot of gifts. Show me the money. Absolutely. Rivka was wearing and knew that their gifts would also be coming from a wealthy man. But what she had been already given, she knew had to come from a wealthy man. And so it was. After a little more bartering, Rivka, along with the women who cared for her as a child, accompanied Eleazar back to Canaan. And we were told that it was just the nurse, but I've also read in commentaries that it was her nurse and other ladies that took care of her. So we go into Bereshit 24, verses 54 to 61. It says, he and his men then ate and drank and stayed the night. In the morning, they got up and he said, send me off to my master. Her brother and mother said, "Let the girl stay with us a few days, at least 10. After that, she will go." He answered them, "Don't delay me, since Adonai has made my trip successful, but let me go back to my master." And they said, "We will call the girl and see what she says." Then they called Rivkah and asked her, "Will you go with this man?" And she replied, "I will." So they sent their sister Rivkah away with her nurse, Abraham's servant, and his men. They blessed Rivkah with these words, "O sister, may you be the mother of millions, and may your descendants possess the cities of those who hate them." Then Rivkah and her maids mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rivkah and went on his way. The same blessing that was to Abraham. Now, how did they know that? It was through God. But they knew that Rivkah was the chosen one to bring forth the people. Here we have to remember that Rivkah left her home for an unknown future. She had no idea. How could she? She stepped out in faith. Are we willing to? And the only way to do that is to listen to what God is telling us. Took nothing with her. Yeah. Very true. Yeah, exactly. But she hid it well. As Rivkah, her nurse, and several handmaidens mounted the camels and got ready to leave for Canaan, a benediction was pronounced over Rivkah. That's what we had just read. This was not a standard pronouncement given in that era over a young girl traveling to enter into marriage. Rather, this was a divine prophecy that I'm sure her family had no idea they were speaking. It concerned her producing a large number of descendants, and that those descendants would have victory over the enemies. This, of course, fit in perfect with the covenant Yahweh had made with Abraham, the covenant that now would be inherited by Rivkah's future husband, Yitzhak. But it was being passed down. It was being passed down because of faithfulness, because of trust. Here we learn that building a future requires intentional choices that align with spiritual and moral principles. Have we looked at the choices we're making and what's behind them? You know, it's important that we understand, what are these choices about? Is it really what God wants? Is it really in line with His Word? Are we stepping out in His Word or in our own feelings? And it makes a big difference. So the caravan arrived back from its journey, and Yitzhak and Rivkah laid eyes on each other for the first time. Now, the covering of her face with a veil was kind of interesting because Hebrew women didn't do that. They didn't wear veils. And there's no mention of Sarah ever wearing a veil. And it was not Mesopotamian custom to wear veils as a show of modesty. There was some use of veils in that part of the world in that era, but it's kind of a decoration, even as a show of wealth. The only customary use of a veil from among Israelites, Canaanites, Mesopotamians, and Sumerians, and so on, had to do with wedding and betrothal procedures. And it was customary for the bride to be married with her veil down. The groom was not allowed to see her without the veil for some amount of time before the wedding ceremony. Rivka was likely letting Yitzhak know that A, she was the one his father had chosen for him, and B, she had consented to be his wife. In fact, the betrothal period had already begun. The fact that this bride and groom entered Sarah's tent was symbolic of Rivka's assuming the position of matriarch. Go ahead, Maria.
I always wondered why the first thing he did was to take her into his mother's tent. I figured, well, gee, you know, this kid's got money. Why did he give her her own tent? But after studying and remembering what Pastor Bruce taught, do you remember? That when Sarah was alive, that the tent had the presence of God, the bread, the candle saying lit from one Sabbath to another. And when she died, that disappeared. And I got to thinking, well, maybe Isaac wanted to see if she was able to take the place of his mother, and took her into the tent. And the rabbis and the Jewish writing says that as soon as she entered the tent, it all came back.
Correct.
The presence of God, the cloud, the bread smell that came back, and he knew then that Rebecca was able to take over the position of matriarch for the
Yep. Okay, Maria, you can
whatever.
give me back my notes now. Yeah. Scripture says that because of all this, Yitzhak found great comfort, finally, by marrying Rivka, which infers that he had a lot of sorrow after his mother's passing. Yeah. And I think we all would have. The finding, he didn't go back, he stayed away for 3 years. Yep. Well, that's a hard thing to face. Anyway. So, in Bereshit 25, 1-9, it says, Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimran, Yokshan, Midian, Yishbak, and Shuach. Yoksan fathered Shiva and Dedan. The sons of Dedan were Asherim, Letushim, and Leumim. The sons of Midian were Iphath, Epher, Hanok, Avida, and Eldah. All these were the descendants of Keturah. Abraham gave everything he owned to Yitzhak, but to the sons of the concubines he made grants while he was still living, and sent them off to the east, to the land of Kedem, away from Yitzhak his son. This is how long Abraham lived, 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last, dying at a ripe old age and an old man full of years, and he was gathered to his people. Yitzhak and Ishmael his sons buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zochar, the Hittite, by Mamre. Abraham took another wife, a woman called Keturah, of whom we know next to nothing really, although many believe that this was Hagar. Bible scholars are not even totally clear whether or not Abraham was married to Sarah at the same time as Keturah. That said, after further study and research, it's clear that we should not assume that Abraham's taking Keturah as a wife was chronologically in chronological sequence. Go ahead, Tila.
Well, I found it interesting, here he takes Keturah, but then down in verse 6, it says, but Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines which he had. This guy was really busy.
Yes.
Very busy in his old
Absolutely.
age.
Yep. So, in other words, Keturah and Sarah may have both been Abraham's wife at the same time. The Torah commonly employs a literary device whereby there is an interpretation to the sequence of events. Or, I'm sorry, an interruption to the sequence of events. The story goes back a few years and adds new information about someone or something. And it's not unusual for the Bible or the writings from other cultures in that era. So, one possibility concerning the timing of Keturah stands out above all the rest. The sons of Abraham born through Keturah could have been born to Abraham before Isaac. Now it says could have. The sons of Keturah could have been born before the sons of Sarah, before Isaac. And we know one was Ishmael. And it just says there may have been others because Ishmael was a teenager. Yeah. So what happened in the interim? Anyway. Yeah. And part of this assumption is because Abraham was far past the age when men typically have the ability to have children at the parent. Yeah, maybe not. And it could have been miraculous conceptions.
In the Renewed Testament, it says that the father of John the Baptist was considered an old man, ancient,
Yeah,
and he was still working at the temple, which means he was under 50.
yeah,
And he was an old man,
yeah.
A lifetime studying. I'll never get it.
You have something, Gary?
Well, two things. I have a comment and a question. I'm just thinking that if Abraham would have kept it zipped, there would be a lot of problems that we would not have today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Secondly, this is for Pastor Bruce. At what age did priests retire? 50?
Yeah, 50.
50.
Right. Okay. So several scholars chose the approach that it was miraculous conceptions, but that actually Abraham could father afterwards. But it's all at this point a matter of speculation. We're told that Keturah gave Abraham several children, of which 6 are mentioned. We have no idea who Keturah was or who her ancestors were. However, it is clear that the etymology of Keturah's name is the Hebrew word ketoret, which means spices. In fact, certain tribes that have long been suspected as being descendants of Abraham and Keturah were associated with the spice trade in ancient times. So it's also helpful for us to know that the prime spice producing region for the Middle East at that time and for many centuries to come was an area of southern Arabia today known as Yemen. This shows just how extensive and regular trade and travel was among the ancient people so long ago. You know, and as is customary in the Bible, only Keturah's male children are mentioned. Yeah. But it's unthinkable that Keturah didn't give Abraham several daughters as well. It would be very unusual to have that many sons and no daughters in the interim. Possible, maybe, but very unusual. We're told that in verse 5 that Abraham gave everything he owned to Yitzhak, which would have made Yitzhak a very wealthy and powerful man. Yeah. This gift also set the stage for enormous jealousy and strife between Yitzhak and his large cadre of half-brothers and sisters, especially Ishmael. The strife and jealousy continues to this very day, as we see. With all these brothers and sisters, dozens at the least, Abraham had to do something to assure Yitzhak was decisively and without opposition elevated above all the rest and given a clear path to continue along the road of covenant promise that Yahweh had ordained. This is another dramatic example of the ongoing God's principle of dividing, electing, and separating. This time, the subject of the division was a separation and separation was Yitzhak. He was separated and set aside as the chosen one. Go ahead, Maria.
The book of Jubilee, I believe, said that Abraham visited Ishmael numerous times. He would go to his tent and talk with him, and they had a very good relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, but he still was not the chosen one. But God had promised him also a very large contingency. Yeah. Yep. So upon his death, Abraham gave everything to Yitzhak. But we're told that he also gave gifts before he died to the sons of his concubines. And although most Bibles say that Abraham took Keturah as his wife and Hagar as well, or maybe they were the same person, they were not technically his wives as Sarah was. They were concubines, a different class of wife. And these so-called wives would not have been given a ketubah, a marriage contract. I thought that was very interesting. They would not have been a marriage ceremony. Rather, there would have been a simple declaration by Abraham that they were to be included in his household as legitimate mothers of his children. These concubines were well treated and respected, and they enjoyed the same status as being joined to Abraham's clan. They did not, however, have the exalted status of a legal wife, and their children had lesser rights of inheritance than the sons of the legal wife. So in fact, the law of that era was that it was entirely up to the father to choose which, if any of his children from concubines, would gain inheritance. Well, Yitzhak got all the inheritance and family authority. The other sons of Abraham, by means of his concubines, got gifts. likely fairly substantial gifts because Abraham was so wealthy. Abraham sent these sons away to other territories. Another example of how dividing and electing always leads to separating. This parallels God's permitting circumstances to unfold that led to the necessary separation of Abraham from his nephew Lot. Notice that once again, they were sent to the east. And I thought that was interesting to note that they were sent to the east. It wasn't part of Israel. It was away. Then in verse 7, Abraham died at the old age of 175. And what a life he lived. This parashah reminds us that life's true measure is not in the length, but in its depth. How deep is your life? Especially with those around you. Sarah's life is celebrated through the values she instilled, which continued through Yitzhak and Rivkah. Abraham's insistence on purchasing the burial site teaches about integrity and foresight. He does not accept shortcuts, but invests in permanence, symbolizing commitment to the covenant and the future. So, how do we ensure our values live beyond us? Are we willing to make choices today that would build a meaningful future? Do we recognize the power of simple kindness to change lives? You know, as Tila mentioned, when you're in the hospital, how do you treat the other people? Do the nurses come up and respect you, or are they afraid to have you there? You know, it makes a difference, and people notice. People. And I know it's a stretch, but I'm going to mention it again with the receptionist at the dental office. When we were leaving, for her to come out and say she wanted a hug shows that she could see, and she knows we're pastors. But with that, it shows what type of a legacy you're leaving. Go ahead, Gary.
Something happened earlier this week at my violin lesson that came full circle to me this morning. I shared it with Carol earlier. My teacher and I were tuning up, and one of the things he said, you know, as I'm tuning to him, he said, when we're in tune, you can't hear the difference in the notes. As I was tuning, there's two notes. But once we were in tune, there was no, you could not distinguish between his violin or mine.
Right.
And what hit me this morning was that's the same thing we need to be spiritually with God. Is God is on a certain frequency, and we need to let him tune us to that frequency. We can be close, we can be dissonant. I mean, there's a lot of variation there, but there's only one singular frequency.
Yep.
Where you can no longer tell the difference between God's spirit and our spirit.
Yep.
And that just it hit me like a ton of bricks this morning. So in regards to what you were saying, that if we are in tune with God's spirit perfectly, then all the other stuff you're talking about
falls into place.
Is automatic.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Kate.
I just wanted to share that I was on the phone, it was yesterday or the day, I think it was yesterday. No, it was the day before sunset. I was on the phone a lot with different people about different things. that I had been promised by Verizon and other things, and had to deal with AI before other people came on. It really sets me up to not be nice to those poor people
Oh, yeah.
when I finally get a hold of an actual person. And God told me, look, the way you act and the way that you are, I wrote it down earlier. It identifies who you are
Yeah, it does.
to those
Absolutely.
people. And so I really made an effort when I finally got to the last person with Verizon to be nice to her. And she actually said, I've enjoyed our conversation so much. I hope when you call back next time, you talk to me. And I thought, boy, that's not what I usually hear.
But that's
So-
what happens when you reach out.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
it's
A
interesting.
good example. Yeah.
One of the things that you didn't mention about our dentist receptionist is when he was in the hospital a year ago, May, and I was living there. I ran into her into the cafeteria, and her father was dying. And we had coffee together and actually prayed together. And, we'd never realize what we sow. And this is kind of like what you were saying, is that we never know what our words will mean to somebody else. And I'm sure that the lady that you talked to the last has dealt with a lot of people that weren't very pleasant. Because, she was the last straw. But we never know the seeds we sow. And for her to come around and say, I've got to give you guys a hug, it was a prayer and a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Absolutely. So going on, do we recognize the power that simple kindness can have to change lives? It's not a whole lot, but just simple kindness. And I think, Kate, your example was very good. Once you can show simple kindness to somebody like that, it changes everything.
It
Changes you too, absolutely. And when we're faced with big decisions, do we lean on faith and values rather than fear? Growth often requires stepping out into the unknown. But when we step out, are we stepping out in what God wants us to do? So our last fill-ins here. We need to remember that legacy is built one choice at a time. Like Abraham chose integrity over shortcuts. And like Rivka, let kindness guide your step. Every act of faith and generosity shapes a future worth living, not just for you, but for those you're in contact with. And that's our teaching for today.